EFed Podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. Welcome, everyone, to the EFed Podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. This is episode 49 today. Excited to be here, even more excited that you made the choice to listen in today. Glad to have you. Guys, if you want to connect on the social medias, find us on the Twitter machine at the EFed Podcast. That's the number one way to get a hold of Brian or I. And there you can also find the EFed Podcast question of the week, always pinned to the top of that profile. And of course, also in that Twitter profile is the link to the Discord, our own little EFed Podcast community with about 100 handlers, every side of the game, from Caw to Angle to Roleplay to everywhere in between. If you'd like to join, check out that Twitter profile at the EFed Podcast. There's a link to jump right in. Don't forget about the Patreon over at patreon.com/EFed Podcast. Of course, this is a free show that you get each and every week, but if you'd like to support the show over at the Patreon, you can, and you get some cool perks in the process between early and ad-free shows, between doing things like we did the Bad Graps just recently, we do Q&As, we do all kinds of fun stuff over there. Patreon.com/EFed Podcast. This week on the show, we've got Disler. He's the handler of the legendary XWF character Centurion. We've got him on the show to talk about his long history in wrestling and e-wrestling, as well as his journey moving forward. It's a great conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. Also on the show, we've got the new EFed Podcast question of the week, as well as the EFed Spotlight. But before we get there, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. Please take the time to check them out and see if their fed or their product is right for you. They are the lifeblood behind the show, and we really appreciate their patronage.
Occupy Pro Wrestling, putting the smart back into smart mark since 2012 as we grapple with design and media services for wrestlers, promotions, and podcasters. We strive to enjoy pro wrestling in our community and podcast, centered around interviews with wrestlers and fans alike. If you like what you see and hear, check out the central hub for everything we're doing and the latest from our site partners over at occupyprowrestling.com.
All right, guys, the EFed Podcast is very happy to announce its brand new partnership over on Facebook with the Social Media Wrestling Association. The Social Media Wrestling Association, along with its 16,000 member strong influence page known as Generational Wrestling Society, has proven to be the true revolutionary EFed company of Facebook. The SWA welcomes written, video, and audio promos for its talent, as well as results provided in live 2K audio commentary and written results. The SWA is more than just an EFed. With GWS, all areas of the wrestling community are covered. From belt collectors, wrestling news, trivia, and podcasts, and EFEDs. Check them out on Facebook at Social Media Wrestling Association and Generational Wrestling Society. You can give a search for both. Once you join both, you'll be glad to become associated with the society. And we're going to be posting our show on Facebook exclusively on the SWA and GWS sites. And we're very happy to have announced this partnership with the SWA, and you can hear about it here every week. So guys, go check them out. Social Media Wrestling Association on Facebook.
Defiance, an angle-fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running fwrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at defiancewrestling.com. That's defiancewrestling.com.
Hey guys, are you digging this podcast? Well, we really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you check out my other podcast. The Atomic Dropcast is a look back at the wrestling of yesteryear through adult eyes. We watch the wrestling that we watched as kids, as adults, with a couple of beers in our hands. It's a great time. Check it out over at atomicdropcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
OCW Fed is a hybrid pro wrestling EFed that combines elements of role play and competitive play using the WWE 2K franchise. Whether you're on PlayStation or Xbox, OCW Fed is a creative outlet for gamers and pro wrestling fans alike. With over 16 years experience producing weekly content and live Twitch events, OCW Fed has a thriving community with handlers from all over the world. If this sounds like your cup of tea, come check us out at OCWFed.com, OCW Fed TV on YouTube, and OCW Fed on Twitch. It's like D&D for wrestling nerds.
Hey everybody, it's Mikey. No, we're not back to the show just yet. First, I want to tell you about my Patreon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, am I going to have to pay for the podcast? No. The answer is emphatically no. The show has been and forever will be free. No, Brunk, you will not have to pay for the podcast. However, we have been asked by a handful of people how they can help support the show. And we've also been asked, mostly by Fuzz, why we didn't have a Patreon yet. And I quote, "You stupid I can't believe you don't have a Patreon. I will hurt you if you don't take my money now." End quote. That was Fuzz. He's a scary dude. So with that in mind, you can find us at patreon.com/EFed podcast. Contributions start as low as $3 a month. Thank you very much for your consideration. Please get Fuzz off our backs. The EFed question of the week is brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest-running roleplay EFed, having been established in 1997. With over 100 active role players across 4 unique brands, the EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows. It's home to Stranglemania and the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias and no drama. All styles are welcome. Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. And this week's EFed podcast question of the week, this one came up in the Discord as a demo question. Are you the handler in real life in a relationship? We put up a poll on Twitter and said, are you single, in a relationship, or married? Vote in the comment below and we will go over the results on the show. And we got, much like a Family Feud survey, we got about 100 votes, about 111 actually. And survey says 40.5% of you guys are married, 33.3% or a third are in a relationship, and 26%, just over a quarter, are single. Fun stuff, interesting question. I think as the game got older, more people dove into relationships, and that's what we're seeing here. Here's some of the comments we got on Twitter. At El Perro Award, I am married with children, haha, and have been for the past 3 years. And I've said it on my interview, it is the key to balance all of that, and EFed is just to make it work. Up next is Roland Ehrman. What if I am all 3? You're single, in a relationship, and married? Must be an open relationship. Hey, at Mooncraft Witch. Married for 13 years, 1 kiddo. The husband supports my writing RP endeavors. I've been a writer since I was a kid. I have no intention of stopping. His support is a blessing and he knows it makes me happy. Fair enough. That sounds like a good way to do it. At Maiden Valhalla. I'm in a relationship. Gonna move out of the house in 4 months and get married next summer if the stars align. Hey, congratulations. At Armenian Beast. Married, 2 kids. My son is 17 and sort of inherited the Armenian Beast, though his beast is infinitely more weird than mine, if such a thing is possible. Also, he uses him in regular prose, not in EFEDs. Interesting. Fun way to pass it on, though. At Warren Fitz 45. Married, Mikey, you met her, unless I hired you who you met to play my wife. Nah, you met her. I still have my doubts, Warren. What are the kids saying? That is very sus. I hate myself for that. I'm getting so old. At That Bayou Witch. Married to one of the Fed heads of Hybrid and handler of Dean and Jasmine Matthews. Awesome. Great that your partner is also in the game. At the Irwin109, single but more by design than alone. Hey, that's all right too. At Yinzer says, what? Married, mother of 3. At the Troll Guy, he just posted David Lee Roth's Just a Gigolo. I ain't got nobody. At Sayla Plays Nice, legally married, currently separated. Very wide array of answers there. Let's see what we got over on the Discord side of things. I'm loving it. Highlander 4H, no. Just no. Ron Hall McDonald Hall says no. Just Jeremy Cundiff, affirmative. At King Yellowman, yes. Megan says no. This is, guys, not very specific. Seth is burned, yes, 18 years. Awesome. Ravage, yes, married just over a year, and she knows what I do. Uh-oh. At the Matt Loaf, I'm a single Pringle till I'm ready to mingle in real life. No, he is ready to mingle. Hey-oh. Matt Loaf. At Friendly Neighborhood Cassidy, sing Freebird. Yes, married for 3 years. At SP Josh, yep, 9 years. Gabriel Ohio, single. At Gabriel Ohio, guys, there you go, if you're single. The Parker twins, not in a relationship. Honestly, don't care to be in one either at the moment. At the Troll Guy, before I was forever alone, now I'm forever Ramon. I like it. That's a good way to end this week's EFed Podcast Question of the Week. Appreciate you all for taking the time to answer. Check it out each and every week, pinned to the top of that Twitter profile. You can find it there. Drop your answer in the comments, and it'll be featured on the show. Appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, this is Brian, handler of Brian Ford. Definitely check out EFed Podcast.
Hey, it's time for another EFed Spotlight. A spotlight segment where we highlight a Fed that's out there, take a look at what's going on in their roster, and just kind of give you a glimpse in case you're interested in taking a look. This week, our EFed Spotlight is on Shoot Project. Shoot Project is a cool concept Fed that is a mix between sim and angle. It is angled in the sense that they don't judge role plays. They use Fire Pro Wrestling World as a replacement for match writing. The results are not predetermined by design, but they can be fixed to an angle if desired by all the handlers. How often are the shows? They are bi-weekly shows. They have smaller shows thrown in for extra flavor and pay-per-views every 6 to 7 weeks. There are no RP requirements. The meat of the work happens on the shows via segments. Role plays are mostly for character and filling in the blanks as needed. The main activity hub is through their Discord. People do their RPs in there, and they have a hashtag Spitter channel, which is their take on roleplay Twitter and character Twitter, where they have one for each character that you mess with. They have a lot of active championships. They have the World Heavyweight Championship, their Iron Fist Championship, which is a last man standing stipulation, their Sin City Championship, defended every Revolution television show. The Shut Up and Fight Championship, defended every Shut Up and Fight television show. The Tag Team Championships and the Triad Championships, which are 6-man titles. You can check out their top 10 wrestlers over at shootproject.com/2020/singles rankings. You can find them on Twitter at shootproject. And of course, the website is shootproject.com. You got to love that the Fed goes the extra mile for that .com. They've got about 15 handlers right now on their roster, and they're always looking for more. It's exciting. I checked out a couple of their shows myself, and I love this concept. What they do between putting the shows on Fire Pro right into the middle of their written card or their written results, it's a lot of fun. You should definitely check it out. Even if you're not interested in Fire Pro Feds, take a look because it's almost a really cool crossover. Additional information, they consider this the most convenient way to EFed. They pride themselves in being able to put on a really good quality product while not breaking themselves to do it. There's no match writing requirements, which means more freedom to write the stuff you want to write. Additionally, they have a robust community that talks about all kinds of stuff on Discord, a fan experience through a pick'em game where real money can be won, and a Twitch channel that runs matches and serves as our WWE network. Guys, check out Shoot Project. This is a really cool deal. I'm excited about it, and I might even take my character over there at some point. shootproject.com, or on Twitter at shootproject. All right, guys, you've heard us talk about the perks you can get at the Patreon over at patreon.com/EFedPodcast. Well, this is not a shill, this is not a commercial, but one of the perks over there is that you can get a shout out or a little commercial of your own once a month, and not many people take us up on it. But this week someone did. So this is from Fuzz. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another Fuzz's Friends segment here on the EFed podcast. Of course, I chose the Centurion podcast to dust this old bad boy off. While I've known him for a long time and I'm sure his interview is going to be great and informative, I'm here to fix something from last week, an error, if you will. The EFed Spotlight last week was Project Honor, and while everything Mikey said was spot on from the Fed and who all is there was one major omission from the roster. Me! That's right, people. If you want a real challenge, come on down, face off against the one and only Sean Fuzz Warstein. Since I've been there, they have been nothing but welcoming of me and my ego, a relaxed backstage environment, and handlers that are passionate about the hobby. So come on down, catch these hands, and have fun in Project Honor. All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the EFed Podcast interview series. This week, I'm joined by Disler, the handler behind the legendary XWF character and current UGWC character, Centurion. How you doing, Disler?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing good, buddy. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Hey, what else am I going to do on a Tuesday night, I guess?
That's right. Other than maybe watch the debate.
Yeah, well, so as someone who is like heavily involved in politics at a local level, I think I'd rather just like hit myself in the head with a hammer. When you're involved like with that stuff all the time, you do not want to do it on your free time as well.
Sure, I understand that for sure. Well, good deal. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm excited to get to talk to you. I know one of our biggest participants in the Discord is one of your good buddies, Mr. Fuzz.
Who? I don't know that. I don't know that person. Are they still okay? Well, actually, let's because we're started, and I know that Sean is listening. I'm going to shoot on him for a little bit. Does he do anything other than subtweet on Twitter, or is that just his entire genre now?
I mean, almost. That's almost it. But he's also the showmaster for my stuff. He retweets everything I put out, whether it's EFed Tees or
that is true.
Podcast.
That dude is a mark for you. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate the love. He's the guy who got us going with the Patreon and everything else. So he's been nothing but supportive for the show.
He's riding those coattails all the way to victory.
He's over like Rover on the EFed podcast. That's all I'm saying. Well, hey, let's talk about how you first got into professional wrestling. When did you become a fan, and who caught your eye first?
So I remember it was about 98. That's about as early back as I can remember. I would have been 10, I think, at the time. Yeah,
okay.
I was 10. Simple math. I mean, that was the Stone Cold and McMahon stuff at the time. I mean, I don't know anyone who wasn't heavy into that, because it was the everyday man against the boss, the guy who runs the show. That I think that brought everybody in sort of around that. It was my age around that same time.
Yep.
It was, once we started, and I should say I didn't really gravitate towards like actual wrestlers for the wrestling, because at the time I was so young, I didn't quite understand the art of wrestling. It was really like when I started watching guys like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, who I saw their ring work, and it was like, oh, this is actually like really interesting and unique stuff. It's not just someone beating up someone else in a corner.
There's another level to it. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole ring psychology thing, once you get past the curtain and the lights and the everything else, and you start seeing the actual athleticism and the psychology and the story that's being told in the ring, it becomes a whole lot different of a viewing experience.
Absolutely. I definitely get what you're saying. And by basic math, I can tell that we're about exactly the same age. So I can tell you I was on the same stuff.
If we're in EFedding, I think most of us are probably that same age now, because we were all like in our early teens or whatever when we got started.
Yep, absolutely. So, so as your fandom evolved, who did you become a fan of? Like, obviously you mentioned Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho. What about in later years? Did you continue to watch wrestling? And what about today?
So I stopped probably around 2003, 2004, somewhere in that area. I didn't pick it back up, I'd say, until about 2011. I had a buddy of mine in college that was my roommate that was still into it. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to watch it, I'm going to watch it. I wasn't into really anyone in that era. It was just I was kind of watching it mindlessly because the WrestleMania main event that year was John Cena versus The Miz with The Rock coming in and interrupting. Like that wasn't like you're not looking at that as it's been a far cry from the era of Austin Rock and all that different kind of stuff. But as I got more into it, then I got turned on to New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Nice.
Where I really became a fan of Kazuchika Okada. I think that's probably my favorite wrestler at the moment. You go AEW. I watch a bit of. I used to try to catch it, but who's going to say over there? I mean, I like to root for some of the guys that didn't get their start over WWE. Like I still like Jericho and I still like Moxley. I think those guys are cool and interesting characters. But I would love to see Kenny Omega become like a superstar without ever having to step foot in the WWE. I think that would be great for pro wrestling.
Yeah, someone self-made, someone that can really get over in the mainstream media.
Yeah, because I don't think we've really. I mean, I guess you could say Omega kind of did it when he was in New Japan, but no one has really become a huge mainstream star outside of the WWE system since WCW went under.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
The Young Bucks have their thing, and like some of these guys have their thing, but not a huge mainstream star like you used to get like Sting was or Flair was, like those guys who you saw and you knew instantly who they were.
Someone that you could ask someone on the street who they were and they would know.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, they have some people who are young and could break out. I think Sammy Guevara's got a bright future and he could be a big star someday. He's very young, very good. I think if they can keep it up, if everything goes well for them, and as it's going right now, it is going well, then I think AEW in general has an exciting future. So excited to see more wrestling.
I do hope that more of a relationship opens up between them and New Japan, because I think it's kind of a shame that there still seems to be this bit of a hard feelings. I mean, I know Moxley and Jericho and stuff, they still work over in New Japan at time to time, but and it doesn't necessarily need to be for New Japan folks to go into AEW and like have some more of an invasion thing, but it would be neat to see guys like Sammy Guevara in like the G1, for example.
Sure.
Or what some of these other guys, even like a Pentagon Jr. over there for a spell. Like that would just be interesting to see. And right now you're really not seeing it as much because the Bucks and Kenny still have a bit of a tough relationship with New Japan with the way things went down.
And I think with all these major companies now, you have New Japan, you have WWE, you have AEW, people, and Ring of Honor even, people are signing exclusive contracts for big money. And this is what happened in the 90s as well. People were locked up, and then as soon as they became free, then they popped over somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. I understand that from a business perspective. I'm looking at it more from a fan perspective. If I was Tony Khan, I absolutely would not let any of those guys go.
Yeah.
Sense at all. But from a fan
perspective, you want those dream matches.
Yeah, well, you want the dream matches because like you're not getting it with WWE.
No.
When you're there, and you're not there, and that's how that goes. But you have kind of this hope that all these other feds might kind of open things up a little bit and let people have a little more freedom. But then when you start talking about, sponsors, TV contracts, and all that different kind of stuff,
gets
tricky. A lot more complicated.
Well, good deal. Well, how and when did you find the weird world of EFedding?
I joined in 2001, and if I could tell you the actual moment, I would be lying to you. If I remember, I'm trying to rack my brain. I think my brother was in it first. My brother ran a character called Maverick back in the CCWF, the Carver Championship Wrestling Federation, and he joined first, and I think I just saw it or something, and I was like, "Oh, that seems neat." I was really young. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I could tell you where I came up with the name Centurion, which was I was playing a lot of Age of Empires 2 at the time, and I was just going through the list of different units you can create. It's like, okay, well, Phalanx doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Could be Clubman. I don't know if I would be Clubman. Well, Centurion sounds kind of cool. That was 19 years ago, and I'm stuck with it for my entire career.
That's awesome. I mean, it's cool that you have like a cool, memorable story of how you got your name.
Yeah, what's fun is that at least it was a neat name. Like I have no regrets about Centurion. I was glad I didn't start with. Well, for example, I'm glad I didn't start with Clubman.
Yeah.
My first character's name was Clubman, and he wore a mask and had a club and he hit people with it. Like,
brutal.
My origin story is at least a little good.
Oh, good deal. What you started with the same character you're running today? That's pretty impressive.
Yep. I've retired this character more times than I can count. But I always loop back to it one way or another.
So talk about how the character was when you got started and what kind of character he was, what the gimmick was, etc. And then like how early success and early failures.
I was green as goose shit. So it was, I don't even know if I had a character when I first started. He was just a guy. He was a guy who wanted to wrestle. Somehow it formed into this businessman idea where eventually he started a casino where he, then started, raking up money, and then he became sort of this high society millionaire. And that was the character I ran for the majority of my time at XWF. I would say the majority of my successes were like this high society, millionaire businessman kind of guy with the suits and the everything else. And then the side story is always with his family. He always has family dynamics. Most of my role plays revolve somewhere around the family dynamics of some sort or another. The last couple years since my return, I retold the story where he lost most of his wealth. And so now Centurion is this older veteran who's in it maybe not so much for the love as he was, but now he actually needs the money. And he's more bitter at the moment. When he started, he was in his earlier to mid 20s, but now he's 43 years old, and he's seeing him being knocked down the card a few times, and it's really evolved as he's gotten older, which I'm actually really kind of proud of.
Absolutely, it's a wide evolution over the course of 19 years. And you talked about in the beginning he didn't have much of a personality; he was just a guy. And I think that's kind of how we all get started. We all have a character who's just, hey, I'm going to beat you on Sunday. Get ready. Here I come.
Well, if I remember correctly, back in those days, I would say from the post mail-in era, because I wasn't around for that. Those veterans are the insane ones. Actually write the role plays and send them in the mail. Boy. But I would say from 99 to 01, you had two characters. One was, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to beat you up, or I like to murder people for a living.
Yeah.
And here is my role play where I put graphic,
murder, death.
Depictions of murdering people. Yeah, those are your two characters back in 01, 02, that type of era.
He slings the body over a meat hook.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I was legit crucified in a match at one point.
My character's been murdered, so I just no-sold it the next week.
Well, back then you had to no-sell it, because if you sold everything, there'd be no one on the roster.
Yeah, you'd run through 40 characters in a year.
Yeah, you get set on fire.
Exploding death match.
Yeah, let's see, people got shot. Okay. I'm glad we've kind of moved away from that a little bit.
Well, good deal. So talk about maybe your first title reign or your first big feud and how it worked out.
So I won a couple of belts. My very first start was actually in CCWF, but I was only
Okay.
there for and I won a couple of tag belts there. It wasn't anything really special. I can't even really remember the circumstances behind that. But my first big win was when I joined XWF. About 3 or 4 matches in, they put me up against this guy. I even remember the character. His name was Eric Furious. Was the champion. And he was the Canadian champion at the time. In a match against him, and I won. And I remember the boards and people online were just shocked because the guy, like, not necessarily that the guy lost per se, because but I guess he was very good at the time. I don't quite remember him, but that I won. I don't think anyone expected me to be winning a title at that point. I surely didn't. But what was amazing about that was my first title run. I went on to win 8 of those belts, the Canadian
Nice.
belts. That was my sort of area within the XWF for the most part. At some point, that belt developed into a more limited role play style competition, and I got slotted in there, and I would say the majority of my work within that division.
Well, it sounds like it worked out well, and it became your main title, and you developed a reputation for holding it. Is your character Canadian, or did you just play up the Canadian gimmick?
No, Canada had nothing to do with it. I don't even think. In fact, the one thing I remember was that Centurion was always a big baby face, except for in Calgary, Canada, and I don't remember why he wrote it that way. But for whatever reason, it was if he could go to Norway, it'd be cheered like the biggest hero. But if he goes to Calgary, he's getting booed.
Interesting that you decided to play face so early on. Did you always? Has your character always been a face? And if so, for how long? What kind of stretches did you have?
The only stretch where I was a heel was when I was a co-owner of the WGWF, which would have been I think 2012 and 2013, I think was when I was there. And I played the heel authority figure role over there with Chris Page. But other than that, my character has always been a face.
Nice.
And in fact, I tried to bring him into UGWC as a heel, and I guess my first run with the Wrestle Stock Cup, I role-played him as a heel. But then it kind of just developed into him being a babyface again because
it's what you know.
Well, what ends up happening is because heels in EFedding aren't like MJF. You know what I mean? They're really, really bad people.
Sure.
And for as cocky and arrogant as Centurion can be sometimes, he's not a bad guy. And so eventually he always turns face. It's just how that works.
It's an interesting concept, and I like it. The fact that you didn't go the easy route to play a heel.
Yeah, playing a heel is difficult, too, to make it interesting. I think it's easy to play. I'm going to get flack for this, but the characters I was mentioning before, the serial killer type characters, I think those are easy to play.
Sure.
Because it's easy to sit there and go, what makes people feel icky, and write that. I think it's much more interesting when you're writing a character that's a heel, that's very clearly a heel, but his intentions are laid out and it's quite. It's thoroughly thought out. I think thoroughly thought out heels are difficult to do, but are very rewarding. That was what I'm going to shout him out a few times in this thing, even though he's a prick. But that was Fuzz. Fuzz would play the heel most of the time, but he was so the character, the dynamic of the character was so interesting. You could tell it was not easy for him to do, because he had to constantly keep adding stuff to it.
And that makes sense.
I think babyfaces in role-playing are extremely hard.
I agree 100%. When
I first started, there was 2 guys, the Brand and Steve Jason. They were always babyfaces. They were incredible. They were not people that could be beat. And then once we got past that, I would say majority of the big champs were always heels. I can't remember many like baby faces standing on top.
And that's in the XWF?
Yeah, that was in XWF. WGWF was different. We had some because there were more. I think limits kind of even the playing field a bit, because I think it's easier to write No Limit as a heel because there's far more that you can like expand upon. Whereas a babyface, eventually people get tired of watching you sipping coffee and watching TV or whatever it is, like my character does. He's boring as shit. But I think limits kind of even the playing field a bit, because now everyone has to write within a certain amount and whatever it is. So if you're going to go on a murdering fantasy, you better find a way to do a murdering fantasy within 3,000 words. and that's tougher to do. And
wrap up your promo.
Yeah, if you have a promo. Some of those older guys didn't even have promos.
They just murder people, yeah.
They just murder people, and then, oh, by the way, he's going to be wrestling this evening.
So you talked about being a Fed head and running a heel primary character there. Well, not running a character, but being an authority figure. Talk to us about what you learned from moving from handler to Fed head.
So I wasn't primary Fed head. Chris Page did most of the work. In fact, I would say Chris Page did probably 90% of the work over there. That was his baby. I was primarily there to judge. I wrote some matches. I did some bookings, that type of thing.
Your first staff role.
Yeah, it was. I tinkered with it in the XWF sometimes when we had ownership fluxes. There would be times when, like, we had one major guy who ran the place. His name was John Brown, and he ran it for the majority of the time it was there. But there were times he got burnt out and he went away, and so we'd be left with like 3 or 4 guys trying to piece everything together. We didn't really have necessarily titles. It was just like, okay, me and Raven and whoever else, Steve Jason, and whoever else is around that has some experience, start writing some matches and putting some shit together until John decides to come back.
You picked up the Fed and kept it rolling.
Essentially, yeah. WWF was the first time I actually had a title. I would never do it again because being a Fed head is really, really, really freaking difficult.
Yes.
And very, very time consuming.
Yeah.
And how anyone's able to do that and have an actual life outside of this is beyond me. I see people who, they have full-time jobs, they have families, they're a Fed head, and they still have 3 characters in other Feds. How the fuck is that possible? I'm
cocaine.
That's not real. That's not a person. That is a simulation that was created and put onto the internet. It's insane. No, I'm glad to kind of wrap up the question. I'm glad to be back EFEDing again and not as a Fed head.
You mentioned retiring the character many times. You mentioned creating a legacy in the XWF. What other titles besides the Canadian Championship did you hold and maintain?
So I was a world champion, but that comes with a caveat.
Okay.
There was a time when in the XWF we had a universal title, which was the highest title, and then we had a world title, which was kind of like the second step. It's like in the WWE and the
universal, yeah.
They had that. Well, not necessarily like now, but like in the mid to late 2010s when they had the WWE Championship and the World Heavyweight Championship, and it's like, yeah, there's the Triple H maybe the WWE Champion and Great Khali's the World Heavyweight Champion, but no one really recognizes the World Heavyweight Champion as actually being a thing. That was our world title, I think. We had some great competitors, but there would always be guys who were kind of just one step below Universal, and I won that. Now, that was 2 of the 3 times I was world champion. There was a 3rd time I was world champion where there wasn't a universal champion that was retired because the character who held the belt had retired and they put the belt away. But we don't talk about that because everyone wants to say I never held the big belt in that federation. Technically, I did, but that's neither here nor there. I won the tag belts 5 times. I won the Extreme title 7 or 8 times. I just came off a run with the Hart belt. That was my first Hart title. I was United States champion, I think 3 times. I've held a few titles.
I guess so. I can see why you've been considered a legend over there, the XWF.
It also helps that I won more matches than anybody else in history. But that's probably because I've been the one that's just been there all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. I recently hoped to find out the same thing about myself in my Fed and found out one person is higher than me in wins and losses, and It irked me because I've been there 5 years.
I hadn't been around for a very long time. I was away from EFEDing close to 10 years. And when I came back on the XWF boards, I saw James Raven had under his signature, he said most wins in XWF history, and he had like 101. I was like, this motherfucker, like, he does not have the most wins in XWF history. He at the time, it was Raven as the veteran and everyone else were these new guys. So I had to come back on the board and bust his balls. So apparently Raven is number 2, but
nice.
That's still like 60 wins behind me.
I like it. That's a hell of a run, man, in XWF. So who were some of the biggest feuds you had for your character?
Well, first of all, is it a feud if one person kicks your ass? Because, like Aiden Collins, I fought a lot of times, but I never beat the motherfucker, so I don't know if I can call that a feud. Fuzz, of course, we went, decades, and some of the freaking role plays were brutal, man. We buried the shit out of each other. How either of us were able to move on after the absolute burials that we gave each other was beyond. Hunter Ryan was someone I had a lot of great work with. I'm trying to think. Dynamic Dynamite, who's a legend over there. We had a really good thing going for quite a bit. There was a guy called Extreme Warrior who actually was Centurion's in character half brother. And so we were tag teaming at one point, and then we feuded, and then there was mostly a feud from that point on. I'd say those are kind of my bigger one.
So talk about why you decided to, I don't want to say leave the XWF, because you're still there helping with things, you're still participating, but why the move to the new Fed?
I'm still role-playing over there with 2 newer characters.
Okay.
I'm there with Tula Kalai, and I'm there with Boris. So I'm still role-playing over there. I just got done with a tag title match. Me and Ruby got beat. The Sisterhood of Besties, name change pending. We got beat by Cataclysm, which is Chris Page and Robert Main. Which if we couldn't beat them, then I think those 2 folks are going to hold the belt until they feel like not holding the belt. If they are, and both. I think all 3 of them. I think both of them. I know Chris Page was, and Robert Main may have been as well, were triple booked that weekend. And somehow they still put out 3 4K role plays each. And that's another one of those things where I'm like, dudes, like, go out and, I don't know, do something else with your life for a moment. I remember sitting there, I had to put up role play very late because I was kind of behind, and I remember posting it and just being like, "Oh, man,
just rolling out promos.
I want to do literally anything else but right." These guys they're just going and going and going. But I came out. I lost the Hart title. Then I lost my match against Fuzz, and I lost tag match. And so since I'm over doing stuff with UGWC, I felt like maybe now is a good time to kind of step away from the XW stuff for a bit, at least as Centurion, because there's not any place for him at the moment. Now, I know better than to call for a retirement because I've done it 2 times, and at this point, you never say you're retired. So I'm not retired. I'm just on the inactive roster until I figure out what the hell I want to do over there. But I'm enjoying my time over in UG, which is part of the reason as to why I could take a break and still feel like I'm rolling.
So you're running the same character over there. Are you running him as an older legacy character, a veteran?
Yeah. I mean, people still, it's an interesting dynamic because he's older and everyone sort of kind of knows his background, but he's new there. And it's this creating a story of, yeah, sure, you are a legend in the business, but it don't mean shit in some place that you've never actually competed in before. And that's kind of the new story that's being made. It's like I built myself up over 19 years in one place. Now I've been here for 2 months. I have to figure out how to raise myself up the ranking.
It's interesting. It's a new concept for you. Something where you're not, I don't know, looked on as favorably as someone who's been there forever.
Yeah, well, it's starting brand new in the sense that when I'm reading role plays, I'm seeing things differently used against me than I did before. In the XWF, eventually everyone wraps around to kind of the same sort of things when it comes to my character. I never won the Universal title. I'm boring, and I'm old. So, and eventually every single person I wrestle will find a way to sneak at least one of those three things into their roleplay. But in UGWC, it really, that doesn't register. The Universal title thing doesn't mean anything because no one there won a Universal title. So what's the difference? The boring thing, I mean, eventually they'll get to that because I'll just run out of shit to do and so I will be boring again. And the old thing, there are guys over there whose characters I think are as old, if not older than mine. So
some interesting matchups.
Yeah, you have to be a little more you have to have a little more initiative to be able to go after my character over there. Not that they're not, because my God, have I been getting my ass kicked in the last 2 weeks. But it's interesting to see something.
Sure, and it's a fun experience too. I've recently dipped my toes in new waters, and it's interesting. Well, good deal, man. Talk about your other characters. You mentioned you have some others that you started using, and in the past you've used others. So mention some of the other characters you might be running.
So right now, actively, I'm running Tula Kalai, who's a Hawaiian MMA fighter. I don't know why I came up with this character. She's kind of bland. I've started working some new stuff in there where I think I'm making her a little more interesting. But when she first came in, she was just like, it was like creating Centurion again 19 years ago, where it was just like, this is just the person who likes to fight. Now I got to find some personality for them. Boris is a drunken Slav who's kind of an idiot, but everyone loves him. He might be like my most fun character to just like screw around with, because anything I could put with him, whether it's just like segments or role plays or even just the Twitter or whatever, it's just complete nonsense. It's just all just crap, and it's amazing. Like people get a chuckle out of it, and so that's why I wanted that character. I tried to make him like more full time. That was stupid. He needs to just be around. So I'm doing those two. My most successful character outside of Centurion was Jocelyn Camden, who was this sort of foul-mouthed Brit when I was over in WGWF. She won the world title over there about 3 or 4 times. Was highly successful with her. Why I was as successful with her, I don't necessarily know. I know my trash talk was on a different level then, and that was when trash talk was
paramount.
It was scored more, I think. And nowadays I feel like it's more of a blend, though I will get more into that because the differences between XWF and UGWC I think are striking. But in terms of like how I like, and maybe it's because I was able to tap into something different, where I have a character that's completely not me, and so I had to add more creative writing to the process. You know, perhaps that had a lot to do with it. Whereas when I start getting kind of like in my groove with Centurion, eventually he just becomes me and it becomes more.
It's interesting, yeah. You talk about how hard it is doing different styles and doing totally different thing from an outside perspective. So it's a new way to challenge yourself as a writer when you've been doing one character for so long. And I commend people who can write more than one character at a time, because I always find myself blending them all into one.
Yeah, that is a concern. I think that's why I had to make characters like Jocelyn Camden could not have been any more different than Centurion. So that I could, if I tried to blend them, it would just completely destroy the character.
It'd be real weird.
It would be real weird. Yeah, and I don't know. I lost my train of thought there, but it was interesting.
Well, good deal. You mentioned the differences between the feds that you've been in and the feds you are in, or I guess in this case, the both feds you're in. Talk about what those are and how it's interesting playing a different set of rules.
So in XWF, first of all, with the exception of Anarchy, you either have 2 RPs for a match on Savage, or you have 3 RPs for a match on Warfare, or if you're Universal Champion, you have no limit, and you just be a freaking monster. And I can kind of tell when you read a role play what grades well over there. You usually have you have a story, you have a trash talk, you have to have something that kind of blends the two together. And when the judges get a hold of it, they generally score one part, they score another part, they add a total. Now it's been a while since I've been a judge over there, but I feel like that's still kind of the process. Like when I read a role play over at XWF, I kind of usually tell if it's going to be like if they're going to do well or not.
Okay.
In UGWC, I have no freaking clue. I read Outlast, and this is not a shot at all, but like if I had a scoring sheet, Hide Yamazaki would not have been like near the top in the old scoring system that I did. Now he's a great writer, he really is, but it's just the style that he has is very different than what I'm used to seeing be successful elsewhere. It's not as long. I mean, he's not a novel writer. It's shorter, and he doesn't do the trash talk thing. He's very story heavy, and he blends usually the trash talk in with a story, but there's no separate trash talk. And getting used to that sort of different dynamic is what's kind of holding me up over there right now, because I have to retrain my mind with what people like and what becomes more successful.
You got to get out of the mold that you're used to.
Yeah, and that's why when people like talk about e-fedding in general, it's like, well, what wins and what doesn't? It really depends on where you're at. Because
depends on the judge.
It really does, because you can have a great character in one Fed, and you can write the same exact role plays, and you'll never win in another Fed. Mm-hmm. It all depends on the style and how they look at things. And GWC looks at things a completely different way. And so,
go ahead.
So it's just learning what that style is right now that I'm trying to get a grasp of. Now I see some of these great role plays from people in these matches for Outlast, and they're getting ousted in the first round. So I'm like, okay, what is it that is disconnected in my mind? What is not? What is it that's working over there for some of these folks that I haven't thought of yet? And that's been my main goal, is to figure that out.
Well, good. I'm glad you're still getting the opportunity to challenge yourself 19, 20, well, I guess in this case, 22 years after you became a fan.
Yeah, and there's like, when you go somewhere else, and you've been doing this for a while, and you're not having the success that you thought you would, there's like 3 ways you can handle it that I've seen in e-fedding. These are very stereotypical ways. First way is that you just take it, you're like, okay, this isn't working, what am I supposed to do? And start rethinking your writing. The second one is you get really dejected, and you just start thinking that you're never good enough to cut the mustard, and eventually you just kind of fade away. The third one is when you start getting pissed. And you think that your writing is the greatest of all time, and whoever isn't grading you well,
your entire Fed sucks.
Yeah, it's not your fault. They don't see the greatness in your mind, and therefore they can all suck it because you are a writing genius. I always said if I ever hit the third one, I never want to do this game ever again, because that sounds like a miserable existence to be part of.
So have you been the other two?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We've all been dejected, I think, after a big loss, or after we've been trying to tweak things and it's just not working. But it's tough getting out of those lulls.
It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. Like, if you get yourself into a rut, you can still get yourself dejected, and it can be 19 years after you started. But you have to keep things into perspective. For me, when I came back, I said I was going to do it as long as I was having fun, and I wasn't going to let anything get to me. I don't let the game get personal for me. I see so many people, because now that I'm on Twitter, which by the way, Twitter is a fucking mistake. I don't care. Twitter is a mistake, but I'm on it all the time anyway. But I see people on there that are like e-fedding accounts that get so personal. Like, it's like they take things so personally. sometimes you have to just step away a little bit and understand like how like this is a game. While you put a lot into it and it's a competition and you want to always be great, and sometimes you get lost in the heat of the moment. If it starts affecting your everyday real life, like that's when it no longer becomes a game. And it is when you start sitting there and you're at home and you're getting mad because you're thinking about something that someone said. I'm really digressing, but I would put up role play where I would have my trash talk. I put trash talk in every one of my role plays. I would have people messaging me, telling me that they were offended in real life.
Oh my God.
Because of what my character said about their character.
In character. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe take a step back. Like maybe it's time you find something else to do for a bit, cool off. I don't know, maybe take a shower, whatever it is you have to do, but this isn't doing it for you. If that's going to offend you so much.
That's good stuff. Yeah, no, people, I don't know, people take the game too far. It is a game. Try to relax.
I mean, I understand like I said, it is a competition, and so I understand the competitive spirit coming out. And I try to, if I know the person, like they're in real life type, personality, maybe I give them more slack, because if they're newer in the game and they're younger, I usually just give them a pass. Like I remember what I was like when I was starting out, and I was just a hormonal kid that wanted to scream at everything anyway. So I get that, and if that's you and you're new to this game, you know what, go out there and scream, kid, whatever you want to do. But if you're like in your early to mid 30s and this stuff is still like really grating on you in real life, maybe it's not the right thing for you to be.
Take a break.
Yeah, really. Like when I put the role play down, I close up the computer and I walk away, I'm done. Now I'll go back sometimes, I'll read it, I'll check to see some comments on it, whatever, blah blah blah. But in terms of my emotional involvement with it, once it's posted, it's done, because that's the end of what I can do. Now, if in the course of a match I lose because I had a role play that wasn't as good as the person that I went up against, I still did what I could do. And to get there and be so steamed and so upset over certain things that you can't control, like that's the kind of stuff that you have to kind of take a step back with. Plus, let's get real. The world is shit right now. There's a lot of other things to be upset about than EFed.
Yes, there is.
Like, that's really low on your list of things to be upset about right now.
Yep. True story. Yeah, if EFedding is the thing that makes you mad right now, then good for you.
If you have everything else in your life is great and EFedding's what's pissing you off, I want you to sign up for some canvassing sheets so I can send you out and start knocking on doors for political candidates. And then I want you to come back and tell me how you feel about EFedding.
See if anything's changed, yeah.
EFedding will feel like a trip to the Bahamas compared to that.
All right, so let's get to these Twitter and Discord questions over on the Twitter machine.
I am already regretting coming on here because I know some of the questions that are coming.
This is going to be fun, man. Stop Banning Noah says, during your long-ass career...
No, before we continue, fuck you, Noah, all right? Before we even get anywhere, just go fuck yourself. Go ahead.
All right, that's Stop Banning Noah. During your long-ass career, how has the EFed landscape changed, in your opinion?
I think there's less people doing it, but they're more invested now. I think there was a lot of just casual people who will come and go back in the older days, and now it's people who actually want to do good, solid writing. I think the writing has changed in the sense that it's no longer a quantity race.
Yeah.
Like there was a time when you were either posting 14 role plays in a week, or you were trying to hit like a 10K mark. Like you had these thoughts in your mind: if I don't hit these points, I don't win. And now I feel like because we're doing 1, 2, 3 role plays, unless you're Sarah Lackland because you're fucking weirdo. If you're doing only like 1, 2, or 3 role plays a week, you're fleshing out things more. You actually get more of a solid ground story as opposed to before, where I felt like there wasn't stories before. It was so chaotic that things would start and then get dropped within the course of 3 days because that was 6 role plays.
Used to be wild. Yeah. No limits. Stuff can get pretty out of hand pretty fast.
It was out of control. It really was. And I look back on it because like there was times when I was posting 10, 15K role plays and I was doing like 8 of them throughout the course of the week. And I don't remember it. Like, I feel like I blacked out in that time. I know I did it because I was here at the time. Like I was doing it, but I don't remember actually writing them. I don't know what any of the context was of it.
What would you say is the highlight of your career?
I honestly, I think coming back after so long away and doing as well as I did over the course of that year, which would have been September of last year to September of this year, to say that I was away from the game would not be doing it justice. It wasn't even on my radar. I completely forgot. I assumed that e-fedding as a genre was done. I thought people were just done doing it. And so to be able to come back after all that time away and still like be able to put out not just good work, but some of the best work of my career, like that I think was probably my best accomplishment.
It's a good answer. You don't hear that very often. You always hear, "Oh, I finally won that world title."
No, well, it was easier to role play when I was in college, and I would go to class at 9:30 in the morning and then drink and write all day. But now I'm 32 and I'm married and I've got a full-time job and I'm political activist and I'm still sitting here and writing role plays and doing well. That is the accomplishment in of itself.
Is there anyone around now that you feel would thrive in the old days of the XWF?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few. Well, the first name that comes to mind really was Robert Main. I look at his style now, and he would have been just as easy fit back in the old days. Not a problem. Now, it also depends on what we talk about with old days. So we're talking about like the late 2000s where there were, it wasn't as limited as it is now, but there were still limits. Or are we talking early 2000s where it was just the Wild West and everyone did what they wanted to do? Both of those things are different answers. Now, someone like Sarah Lackland has proven that if she wanted to go back in time and role play with the old folks and put up 14 role plays in a week, she would have no problem doing that. But I remember when some of the older folks were coming back, myself, and then there was a sort of an invasion angle with Chris Page and Buzz came back, and a bunch of us just sort of came, it was right around the time of our 20th anniversary. And there was this old veteran that came back who went on this big tirade about the Hall of Legends and the top rankings and stuff, saying it doesn't count because none of these guys competed in the old era. And I understand gatekeeping that if you're like, because I was back then too, and I would love to think that it was harder to win then than it is now. But you can't say that for sure.
No.
Because the game is so different. You have no idea how people would have adjusted, how some of these guys who are here now would have adjusted to the roleplay styles of before. And we don't know how the people before would adjust to today's styles. It's possible that people that we knew that were great writers back in the early to mid 2000s would not be good writers today.
I've seen it happen. It's true.
It's like the gatekeeping of old veterans in this game sometimes, like it frustrates me because I remember being new and everyone saying, "Oh yeah, no, you're good, but it's not as good as like this person from 2 or 3 years ago." Blah blah blah. That just always happens. But we're now been around and we're now old enough that we shouldn't have to revert back to the old ways. Like we should know that for the game to continue, we need new people to sign up and do it. And B, like for those of us who role played then and role play now and we lose now and we lost then, clearly like it's what am I trying to say here? It's not necessarily that there was I lost my train of thought again. This is what happens when we have conversations at night. Eventually, but no, I just get frustrated sometimes when some of the veterans like to try to say that that you can't do this or you wouldn't have been good then or that type of thing.
Because you can never say.
You have no idea.
So last thing from Noah, say nice things about me.
Absolutely not. I will say nothing nice about the man, and if he has a problem with it, he can sue me.
At TW Combat, did you find it harder to compete in today's XWF or the XWF of 15 to 20 years ago?
It was harder to role play 15 years ago because of the dull limits, and you always had to constantly. You couldn't go on vacation because you would lose. It was just that was just the natural form of life. Because if you missed 3 or 4 days, you were screwed. But the depth, I think, is more now than it was then. I think back then you had 2 or 3 guys who were excellent, and then you had everybody else. I won 160 times because I fought with everybody else for a very long time. And so when you have folks that nowadays you can easily see slotted into different positions, you can boost someone on any given week because all the writing is so
quality.
What's the word? It's refined. People, I don't see people wasting words as much anymore. We wasted words back in the day.
You were racing to have the most words.
Yeah, people would just put up nonsense, and now I feel like if you try to put up nonsense, at least the way I see it in the XWF, and I'm pretty sure it's the way it is in the UGWC as well, because I see some of the winners over there, and they don't waste words either. If you try to put up just nonsense, like non sequiturs that have nothing to do with anything, it's just going to completely tune everybody out, and you're not going to win that way. Whereas back in the day, if you looked on your scroll bar, and depending on the size of the scroll bar and how long it would take to scroll up and down your role play, that was usually what determined the winner.
Sad but true.
Yeah.
At I Am Tempest, who are some characters you see yourself working with in the future in UGWC, either as allies or as rivals?
So Tempest is asking this question because I take shots at him in all my role plays.
Because you see him, yeah.
Because he's like this creepy kind of character, which is the exact opposite of Centurion. And so that's why I kind of put those things out there. Like it will not be long before I'm facing him. I can assure you that. There are so many people over there that I could do so much with in terms of from a creative standpoint. I came back, I did the wrestle stock thing, which was supposed to be just a one-off thing unless I won it. I came runner up, and I decided I still wanted to do stuff because I saw some characters over there that I really enjoyed. And the first one I worked with was Gabriel Ball, who, the way I told it to him, our characters are very similar, but also very different in our motivations. And it made the back and forth in terms of the segments, the tweeting, and the role plays so good because we were able to really hash that kind of stuff out. Moving forward, I mean, Eden Morgan comes to mind. I've already faced T-Day, and now that he's champion, I'm probably the bottom of the list with that. Lucy Wilde, who beat me in the WrestleStock Cup, I think I'd love to get another shot at her. That's Sebastian, the guy who's just world champion, Sebastian Everhard Overholt, before everything. I make fun of it, and in my role plays I always make fun of his name, but he's and I think he's the same guy who role plays as Gabriel Ball as well. Immensely talented, just immensely talented, and there's a person who's writing as both a heel and a face and doing both very well. And I don't know how that takes some sort of mind magic shit that I don't understand. Though there are quite a few people. I mean, I didn't even touch like Alan Wallace and Travis Roberts. I know those guys are very good. I just don't know enough about them yet. But like there's a whole crew of people there that I'm sure that if you pluck me in a program with them, we would do some really amazing things. Oh, and one more, Duncan Ryder, I want your fucking belt, all right? I like nothing to do with you, even though I'll probably still take some shots to you on Twitter, but I want your belt.
At WWJBCD, ask him to rank every competitor in Outlast in order of likelihood.
The freaking thing is so he asked the question prior to Outlast going up, but Outlast went up yesterday, and I'm having the interview today, so I don't have to rank anything.
So rank them by number one. Who's number one most likely?
Okay, and guess what? You won the tournament. All right, you can go fuck yourself. You can rank nothing. They ranked it for you. Congratulations, you're the champion.
Interesting how that worked out in his favor.
Uh-huh.
Good stuff. Over on the Discord, we got Fuzz. Are you ready for these?
No.
Fuzz hit us with, let's start with a softball. What are your current thoughts on e-fedding today?
It's a lot stronger than I thought it would be at this point. Like, I felt we were aging out of it a few years ago, and I thought when this generation of role players got to be about in their 30s, I thought this would start being an ancient hobby. And now, not only seeing the older guys are coming back and still doing it, but seems to be this sort of new generation coming in that are on the younger end that still want to do it. That's pretty incredible. And so I would have put a shelf life of this thing on about 2012, and the fact that we're still here, it's 2020, and doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. I think that's a really good sign.
Very fair answer. I like that. What is one thing from the good old days that you don't, and then he says, if you don't say this with a southern accent, Mikey. Anyway, what's one thing from the good old days that you wish would come back, and one thing you're glad is gone? Other than limits, don't take the easy way out.
Well, I'm glad. We'll start with the second one because that's easy.
Okay.
When I talk about people being offended by stuff very easily or take it personally, that was rampant in the quote unquote good old days. Like, people were flame warring each other constantly on the boards, and and there were some guys that were repeat offenders. Not to name any names, but one of them was Siren. But there were some of these folks that I feel like they were just not good people in general, or whatever it was, or they got their rocks off on just being trolls, and they trolled hard, and it made the game sometimes not fun because it did become personal at times because they would use personal insults. I remember Siren got mad at a friend of mine. Her name is Keiko. We're actually very good friends. She operated Tomoko Hanahara over at XWF, and she did a bunch of other characters, and we became good friends in real life. And they had a fight, and so what Siren decided to do was start spamming her pictures of victims of the atomic bomb blasts from Japan. And it's like, once that shit starts happening, like, this is because of role playing, really? Because of e-fedding? And I don't see that shit really happen that much anymore.
Good.
Now the first part. Oh, what would I want to come back? Oh, boy. Me winning would be nice. That a little while. I think, I really don't know. There isn't much from the other times I'm like, well, you should probably think about bringing this back. Maybe a true brand split, but even then we only did it for a short amount of time, and we decided that was nonsense. I don't know if I have anything from that.
That's all right.
The good old days part. Yeah, it's like that. I feel like those of us that are still in it took the good stuff from the good old days and kept it around.
Fuzz's next question is Siren. That's it. That's the question.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even look at the chat. No, what a horrible fucking human being. And I'll throw some other names on there. Chad, we'll toss him on the list. He just went as Chad, but he was a terrible person. Who else can we throw on there? Oh, Kitten. the very first Universal Champion, very first Women's Universal Champion, which is unfortunate because she was a horrible person. Yeah, I'll throw names. I don't give a shit. But Siren, I think, was the worst. And it goes back to part of the reason I think most of us left for a very long time. Back in like 2013, I think it was 2012, 2013. Shane Carver took over the XWF, and he got rid of the bands. And so one of the first people that came back was Siren. And most of us who were the older folks were like, "That's bullshit. Like, we can't." I understand letting bygones be bygones, but there are certain things that we cannot get over. Like, that was way too much. And so we left. And so there's a whole generation of us that was gone for close to 10 years because of one guy.
At that point, how do you decide between 10 guys or one guy?
Well, you just gotta look at someone's like
track record, yeah.
Track record. Like the guy was given chance after chance after chance, and he constantly did just the sort of the worst stuff. And you decide, oh well, we're in a different time frame, so now we can bring him back. The fact that he still wants to do it after all of Big Band all that time, like, that should give you a raise a few flags as well. I don't know. The other thing I'm so glad that we got rid of was there were times when this game attracted just some of the worst individuals.
Of all the people you've encountered in this game, who stands at the top of your list, according to everything, ability, OOC, angle, etc.?
So in terms of all time, probably James Raven. Even though I don't want to give the guy any more of an ego than he already has, but it's true. He's an excellent writer. He took over as a Fed head. He did very well doing that. He manages talent. He seems to be friends with everybody, which is an impossible thing to do. So he would be up there. Steve Jason would be up there. I became really good friends with him. His issue was that when he tried to make several comebacks, he just couldn't do it. It's one of those things where at some point I'm going to learn, and apparently I still haven't. But if the game's gone, it's gone. And it was gone for him, but he still kept trying to push through. Keiko, like I mentioned, great friend of mine, fantastic writer. I think she was also a Fed head at one point as well. She and a couple others they had like a side project away from the XWF with other people, and I think she was part of that as well. I'm not going to mention Fuzz because fuck him.
But he's going to have more questions later, so be ready.
I'm sure you will.
One of his last questions here is, what's your worst moment in e-fedding?
In terms of career, like a loss, or in terms of like a
just overall worst moment you had in e-fedding? And it doesn't have to get too personal.
Well, I mean, I lost it. The funniest one is losing to a e-fedder called Chasm, which I don't think he's that terrible, but everyone says he's terrible. He beat me for the Canadian title once, and he actually put on his signature, like on the boards, beat Centurion, which you and like 75 other people, it's not really that much of an accomplishment at a certain point. But actually, to get a little more personal with it, I won the world title over an XWF. This was in 2006, I think. I believe it was 2006. And right afterwards, I was going through a lot of personal issues. I had a big sort of mental break and that type of thing. And I still kept trying to push through it, but like my work was so not good. I ended up dropping the belt like a week later, and then I tried to do some other shows with some folks that I knew I would have done good programs with, but my writing was just terrible at the time. And that was one of those times when I'm like, I should have just backed away.
Yeah.
But I was stubborn. I just won the belt. I felt like I can't leave now because I'm the man, and I think it did more harm than good. Now, luckily, I moved on from all of that, but like at the time, I should not have.
Fair enough. Sometimes it's easier to back out than half-ass it. I think we've all been there.
Oh, it's what I should have done, but you start thinking.
You get the pressure. Yeah, you want to hang around.
Yeah. So, well, if I leave now, will I ever get back here? Keep in mind that was 2006. All right,
generation ago.
I thought I would leave the business forever if I left in 2006.
Up next is Highlander 4H at Ron Hall, McDon Hall. Something in the game that you still want to accomplish.
I want to be UGWC World Champion.
There you go.
That's my new goal. I can't be Universal Champion anymore. I had my match with Buzz. I put the stipulation out there that if I don't win, I'll never fight for the title again, and I didn't win. And I think that's a good place to stop in terms of that, because I that's going to be a white whale for the rest of my career. It's better to just have the whale eat me than to actually fight. But UGWC is a brand new start, and I see a lot of the folks that have won the titles over there, and there's some very prestigious names over there, and I would love to join that list.
Who did you base your character on when creating him?
Boy, at the time, good lord. Well, my original pick base was Christian.
Nice.
But I can't say we shared any similarities. I don't know if I based him off of really anybody. He kind of morphed into like this Kurt Angle. If annoying Kurt Angle was a face, that's kind of what he morphed into. Just like way too baby face.
Over the top, yeah.
Yeah, kinda, yeah.
The best advice you ever got in the hobby.
God, you do this for 19 years, you think you've heard it. I don't know.
It's hard to come up with it on the spot, yeah.
Yeah, it's going through my brain. I cannot think of something.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure I've gotten great advice. I got a lot of great writing advice, but writing advice doesn't help really in terms of a full career, because you never know how the game's going to change moving forward.
Sure.
In terms of just temperament and stuff, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Last question from Ron. How much is Mikey paying you to be on the podcast?
Is there pay?
Wait, you guys are getting paid?
You guys are getting paid for this? I was told I had to pay to be on the show.
Shh, Ron.
I had to send a check to a guy. He said he was a Nigerian prince. Like what?
Oh, princess, get it right. All right. At Cat Pasadena, would you want to hang out with your character, and why?
Yeah, I think I would. I think he'd share a lot of good advice, like life advice. I think he would be just a sort of a decent dude overall. He'd pick up the tab, which is probably the best part about that. It's great having a character that I could say is just a decent dude, because he could hang out with pretty much anybody. Unless you're not a decent dude, then it would be a little awkward.
Yeah, I like the answer, because the longtime face seems like he would be someone you'd want to hang out with. Kind of dry humor. So, yeah.
I mean, a lot of my role plays are him hanging out with people. so
that's what he does.
Not only would I hang out with my character, but I would find a way to write me in that role play.
Up next is John Page. What is your favorite Tom Cruise film?
I have to say, it's got to be A Few Good Men.
Okay.
I wanted to do something more modern. Like the Jack Reacher films I really enjoy, but man, I could watch A Few Good Men anytime and just get into it. And the original Mission Impossible in the same way as well. Like the very first one. I like both of those. I could just go back and watch anytime and just enjoy it.
Was Mung Bean one of the greatest EFed characters of all time?
You don't fung with the Mung. Mung Bean was amazing. There are certain characters that like they made their name being jobbers, and like Mung Bean was one of them. But like it more like we had another guy, Honky Lighthouse, who was bad for the sake of being bad. But Mung Bean like morphed itself into like this endearing character. It was pretty funny. Boy, that's a name I hadn't heard in a long time. Mung Bean.
Fuzz didn't ask a question, but he commented, mention of Mung brings a tear to my eyes. Final question from John.
anyone who was around back then that's listening to this podcast just went, Longbeam. Oh my God.
Who, in your opinion, was the greatest XWF Universal Champion?
The Brand. Yeah, he was there when I showed up. He never lost the belt. He wrestled. I think he went 71-0. I think was his final tally. Never lost. And he was sort of the, if you look at a lot of the guys that came up sort of right immediately afterwards, whether it was me or Steve Jason, and then eventually would have been like guys with James Raven and you see that style was sort of originated by the Brand. Like he was the person that really, that, the sort of the whole do everyday stuff but make it interesting type of thing, that he did that so well. And to be able to hold off the competition as much as he did, then walk away on his own terms, like, you can't do it better than that.
Perfect ending.
It really is. He literally was Universal Champion. He said, "All right, I'm done." He retired. Never came back. There was never like a second to the Brand. No, like he was done. I mean, we all wish we could do that, but now here I am on my 14th return and try to figure out where I'm at with my life, and
we're enjoying retirement.
The Brand sitting there, sipping champagne out of a cold tub.
At Evil Patriots fan, why did you praise Anya Coyle when she's a bitch?
What?
Anya Coyle. Apparently, you praised her when she is a bitch. Must be a Twitter
Anya
thing.
Coyle.
Why would you do that?
I don't know. I don't understand that one. I don't know. Hold on, let me Twitter search here. Anya Coyle.
All right.
Nothing. I got nothing. I don't know. Maybe they confused me with somebody else. I don't know.
All right, Megan's second question. Do you like cheese?
Absolutely. If you dip anything in cheese, I'll eat it. You can dip my shoe in cheese. I'll find a way to eat it.
Up next is Rick. And I don't know if you've heard the show before, but Rick he asks everybody the same questions. So here we go.
Is this like the you shoot how big is Batista's dick thing?
Yes, that's exactly what this is. Question 1, is your mom hot?
I guess for a lady with chronic health problems in her 60s. I mean, if you would, I don't know. I don't know.
If you like medical bills, she is. Hey.
Yeah. If you're into going to the hospital at least twice a week, she is right up your alley.
Second question, is she single?
No, she's still married to my father.
Oh, well, see, you're out of luck, Rick.
Yeah.
Question 3, here's where he gets kind of halfway serious. What, in your opinion, is the most entertaining storyline trope to follow in EFEDing, and what's the worst?
I think the worst has to be. I think the worst is the new guy getting pushed immediately. There's some folks that works for, like Charlie Nichols over in XWF just got a Universal title shot, but the dude like role plays. He's on every single show literally, and he just works his ass off. So I understand that. But there are some folks that would have like a 1 or 2 match run, and then suddenly they are the main event program, and like they haven't shown you that they're long-term folks, and there were many times when those folks lost that big match and you didn't see them again. They're gone. Best trope, I don't know. I wish I had some suggestions, but I have no clue.
It's all right. Rick's got a bunch of questions.
Anything I'm involved in is my best trope.
Here's one I stole for the EFED podcast question of the week this week. In an alternate universe, your characters are real and you are the EFED character. What is your gimmick and how do you get over?
So I become Centurion in real life?
Centurion is the handler, or Centurion is the handler, and Disler is the character.
It's the character. Oh, Jesus, good luck.
What's the gimmick and how do you get over?
A guy that has no cardiovascular system and shit knees, and he gets over just by being like kind of funny once in a while and makes people show him a little bit of sympathy. That's all I can think of.
It's the old Mikey Whipwreck.
Oh God, I would not want to watch a program with me on it. That would be awful.
least you're honest about it. That's good stuff. Okay. Next question from Rick. Fall is coming. That means hoodie weather. Have you checked out eWrestling Tees, and did you know that they have a tremendous selection of hoodies? It's truly stupendous. Absolutely the greatest selection ever. Trust me, I would know. Also, don't forget to check out the Atomic Dropcast while you're interested. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate the free shouts.
That's it. Any other plugs you want to put in that question?
That's a good friend and a great listener.
eWrestling Tees doesn't have any Centurion stuff, so I'm gonna pass for the moment.
Not yet. We'll talk to him after the show. Up next is at MDG, Modern Day Gladiators. What is your favorite Pink Floyd song? Asked in the best Dennis Miller impression. Yeah, sorry about that. No Dennis Miller impression here.
What?
He asked me to do a Dennis Miller impression, and I don't have one. So what's your favorite Pink Floyd song?
Probably Wish You Were Here.
I wish I was too, buddy. Okay. Up next is Ravage.
Oh, God.
Is this a pimple?
What is this podcast?
It's my Discord devolving into the interview questions. At Ravage, is this a pimple or a boil?
What the hell? What
do you get the reference?
This for?
This is the general e-fetting audience today, man.
God, I remember being called like horrible gay slurs back in the mid 2000s, and now I'm being asked
none of that. They just want to know if this is a pimple.
Seek advice from someone who knows better.
What is your favorite wrestling moment that happened outside of wrestling?
That's an interesting question. Because the first thing that comes to mind would have been the announcement of AEW, like that press conference in Jacksonville where they had the people coming in. Yeah, and Jericho walked out. I think that was the first time that Jericho was confirmed to be there, and it's either that or it's the first time I saw the New Japan Long Beach show, right when it opened. And actually, I'll expand on that. It was one of the New Japan shows, and Minoru Suzuki was coming to the ring, and of course he was playing his theme, and then the whole crowd screams "Kaza ni Nare," with part of his theme, and he just stands there and looks and gives a smile because it's the first time I think he ever heard it screamed at him from an American crowd, but they were screaming in Japanese to him. Like that, it was just this kind of neat moment where it was just like, oh, okay.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Wrestling is always great when it can hit you in the feels or get you excited. Is Ready to Rumble really that bad?
Yes. in the sense that almost all late 90s, early 2000 movies are bad. That I know there are some that we look back on with these great, big eyes and nostalgia or whatever, but there was a lot of crap that we consumed.
Easily, yeah.
Is it like the worst movie that came out that year? Probably not, because there's a lot of just crap that we consumed back then. That was right around the same time. Wasn't Geely out there around that same time?
Yeah,
and
or a couple of years later. Rollerball was, I think, a couple of years later. No, maybe it was about the same time.
The Rollerball was 2002.
That was so bad.
Yeah, that would have been 2 years late. That's the stuff that we consumed when we were kids. So yeah, it's all terrible.
Who has inspired you the most?
In e-fetting or in life?
In life.
Boy, we're getting deep on this.
This is not only the EFed podcast. This is the E-Life podcast.
Oh boy, I feel like eventually I'm gonna start crying, and then you're gonna start giving me calls.
Okay, now, Disler, what you need to do is
that's a pretty good Dr. Phil.
Thanks, buddy.
Honestly, it would be my grandfather, because he was the one that got me into politics to begin with. Even though we were on completely different sides of the aisle politically, one of the things that he really taught me was the value of community service and reaching out to the people that you're connected with, because a good community, you are better off if your whole community is better off, and it's not going to get better off if you don't do something and you don't lift a finger to help it. And so I took a lot of that sort of advice and rolled with it. Now, when he found out I was working for the Obama campaign, he damn near died. But he was still, it was still interesting because even when he was getting sick, and I was getting more politically involved, and he was sort of getting towards the end of his life, you could tell he mentioned several times how proud he was because someone took the things that he said and actually applied them in a way that they felt was right to them. So that would be my answer.
Tremendous. You gotta love that.
Yeah.
At Capacity is back. Would you rather take 500 top rope elbow drops from 500 tiny wrestlers or one shoulder block from a monster of a wrestler?
So we go from talking about my dead grandfather to talking about elbow drops.
Top rope elbow drops.
I knew this was a mistake when I signed up for it, but I still I would take the one shoulder block.
You got to, yeah. It's one time.
It's one time.
All right. Fuzz is back.
No.
What would you consider your biggest weakness?
Probably, again, are we talking like in life or we're talking?
No, I think we're talking e-fetting now.
Okay.
Let's bring it back full circle.
probably like that I am kind of boring. Like, there's a reason it's used against me a lot in role plays, and it's because all these other characters, they have these great grandiose stories behind them, and they go out and they do these amazing things. The Centurion, like, he'll wake up in the morning and he grabs a cup of coffee and reads the newspaper, and not that I'm going to change my style anytime soon, because like that's the character. And if that character can't get over, then that character can't get over. But that would be the weakness. Like when I'm going up against, the perfect example is going up against Cataclysm. These are guys who are dark and spooky, and they have this whole big thing, an elaborate setup and plots and everything else like that. You put me up against that, that's not going to win. Like, I'm not going to beat that. So that would be my weakness.
Fair enough. It's good that you can be, it's not only is it the strength of your character that you do the same thing and you know the character well and you know where to go with him, but it's also the weakness that maybe you lean on too much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to tie it back into real life, it'd be stubbornness. Like, I know it's not working, but god damn it, I'm going to do it anyway.
Would you try an angle fed?
With a different character, maybe.
There you go.
Not with Centurion. Like, I've been so used to using him with role playing. That's the only way that I know how to measure the success or failure of that character based on the work I put out in the role play. Now, if I could come up with a different character and do different weird shit with it, would I do it angle fed? Probably.
Why did our group with Raven and Addie never take off?
Because Addie quit 19 different times. No shade to Addie, I love her to death, but there were several times when she would leave, and then 3 weeks later, okay, well this is the time I'm focused, and then that was it, and then she'd be gone again, and then this is the time she's focused. That was the main part of it. And the other part of it is because I don't want to work with you, Sean. Seriously, why the hell would we be a thing?
That leads right into his next question.
And Raven had a good point too. To be serious, Raven had a good point too when I talked to him privately, where he's like, "How do we get this over as something that's not the prophecy?" Because me and Raven were part of a group in the late 2000s called the Prophecy. How do we get this over as something that's not that? It is a decent point. Sometimes you start recycling old things, and you want to move on.
Why did you put yourself in such a no-win situation?
What?
That's what Fuzz said. I don't know.
Just in general?
Man, why do you always
coming on this show? Probably coming on this show. I would
probably.
Assume. Yeah. I don't know, because you did it, and I can't let you do shit that I don't do.
There you go.
That's how that works.
And because it's the number one podcast in e-fedding, here we go. Yeah. Okay. Everyone has their own Mount Rushmore of the greats. Who are your 4 least favorites in e-wrestling?
So are these the 4 people that I know that were great, but that are like, I hate them?
I think it's just the 4 you hate the most.
Oh, okay.
Your least favorite handlers or characters?
Siren, Chad, Kitten, Spice One.
That was easy enough to come up with 4 names really quickly.
But narrowing it down was more the issue. I almost thought about putting Gabe Reno on there, who would be a newer addition. And I really don't. The reason I didn't is because I never actually interacted with the guy personally. I just know that he did a lot of horrible shit to a friend of mine, and so fuck him. Like that's where I'm at with him. Like I don't really know who you are, but like I know what you did to certain people. So fuck you. I don't need you around. But in terms of people who actually are just like actual pieces of shit that were in this game and did bad stuff and got me involved with it, it would be Siren, Chad, Spice One, and Kid.
Fair enough. Greeks, am I right?
You get off of Twitter for a little bit. You and Addie, I don't know what and this may also tie into the thing with Centurion and Genie, which is I don't know.
Mikey asked him about getting called. Fuck, I can't remember. I think it was a cuck by a politician.
Yeah. Was that Chris Dush? One of the state representatives out here called me a beta cuck. I had another guy that I was slamming pretty hard on Facebook, and I ran into him down in Harrisburg, and he called me a fag. I get insulted more sometimes by politicians than I do by like people in e-fedding. I just had one guy. He went on my Facebook page and he went on this big long tirade, and he called me a fat ass 4 different times. Which if you're gonna call me fat, like, dude, come up with something more original than just the word badass 4 times in a row. Come on. Like, seriously, you're supposed to be a politician, and that's the only thing you can come up with.
At Gabriel, Ohio, who is the greatest female wrestler of all time?
Wrestler?
Not e-wrestling.
Okay, greatest women's wrestler of all time.
Yep.
I'm going to say Bull Nakano.
Nice.
Because I went back and watched some of her stuff, like her Japan days, when her and Medusa and even some of the stuff pre-Medusa. I mean, you talk about the women's wrestling in Japan in like the early to mid 90s was a whole different level. I mean, they were
it was a decade ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing like that. That was that King's Row stuff before the men started doing it. Like they were dropping each other on their heads and doing strong style stuff, and they were busting each other open and stuff. And that was just a whole another layer to it. Nowadays, I feel like someone like a Charlie Evans is kind of bringing that same sort of vibe back. But the unfortunate part is that when it comes to mainstream, like Charlotte Flair is a fantastic wrestler. So is Asuka. So is a lot of these other folks. But they can't do the things that you can see a lot of times in Japan or in Europe because the mainstream public doesn't have the stomach for it to watch women do it.
Sure.
Which is a shame because I think you could see some amazing shit. Now, to be fair, I watched the street fight between Charlotte and Sasha Banks. It had to have been 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was actually in Charlotte. That was the one that Sasha won by putting Charlotte in that bank statement through the freaking bars of the stair steps in the crowd. And that was among my favorite matches I think I watched all year. Like it was incredible. So these women are still putting out these fantastic matches, but you can't compare it to what you can see with some of the women in Japan who just leg each other up.
Makes sense. His second question is, what would be your Mount Rushmore of real wrestlers? Top 4.
Ric Flair. Are we going based upon?
This is based on your personal opinion.
Just based upon personal
Your
opinion.
4 favorite wrestlers. Like mine's gonna have D'Lo Brown in it. So what's that tell you?
Gotcha. So it's still gonna be Ric Flair.
Okay.
Kurt Angle.
Okay. I love the Kurt Angle love. I'm a big Kurt Angle fan.
Well, I grew up in central Pennsylvania. Where I was living was an hour away from Clarion University, which is where it got its start.
Really?
So, yeah. So, and I have many friends of mine who went to Clarion University right around the same time that he was there. So,
I have family in central Pennsylvania.
What part?
Just south of Harrisburg, near Carlisle.
Okay, I'm a little more northwest of that.
Gotcha.
Or was a little more. Now I live outside of Scranton, but I lived in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest most of my life.
I just did Scranton on my way. Never mind. Personal stuff. Okay. Recently went to Scranton. Cool town.
Yeah, that's where I cut my teeth now. But yeah, so like he was a local guy before he even made WWE. That's why we were all big marks for him. It still remain as such. So Angle's I would be up there. There was a time when I would have put Bret Hart. I don't know if I still would because I go back and watch his old stuff. Amazing wrestler, but like, boy, that mic works sometimes. if I had to put 5 up there, Bret Hart would be number 5. I'm going to put Kazuchika Okada.
Okay.
Because and I hate to have recency bias, but oh my God, some of the stuff I've seen him do, I've never seen anyone else do. And let's put a light heavyweight up there. I'm going to put S.A. Rios / Bobby Chulo.
Yes.
Say guy. Like I know like Mysterio would be an easy one or whatever, blah blah blah. But like I loved S.A. Rios and I love Bobby Chulo. Like that's some of the shit. Like I don't care. He couldn't speak a lick of English, but man, was he just funny to watch.
Love that answer. You're the first one since Andy Murray to mention S.A. Rios. That's good stuff. All right, man. So last question is from Fuzz. Surprise, surprise. Finally, in all seriousness, it's been a pleasure competing with you for all of these years. Now tell everyone why I'm better than you in excruciating detail.
So, you're a better writer than me, Fuzz. I'll give you that. You're a better writer than me. You know the game, the business better than me. You suck at Twitter. You're probably the worst Twitter person I've ever followed in my life. And at one point, I followed Donald Trump. Yeah, all you do is subtweet all the time. Your characters at a consistent level of horniness that just I can't deal with anymore. Like go take a shower, and then you have to go. You have to go and steal James Raven's spotlight over in your new buddies over in GCWF. You gotta steal the spotlight over there, and I'm sure you're probably talking shit about me over there too, because I'm not watching your stuff or reading your stuff, so I know you're probably taking shots at me. What was the question again? Fuck you, Fuzz.
That's good stuff, man. That's all we got for questions, though, so I appreciate you taking the time. Before we let you go, anything else you want to plug, promote, put over? You want to put the Twitter handle out there?
Yeah, at Centurion Real. That's the Twitter handle. Still on XWF and UGWC, as you said. Make sure you're registered to vote. Absolutely do that. I will never miss a chance to tell people to do that. Vote in the right direction, but I can't get into that here. PM me if you need advice on that. But yeah, no. Please do your civic duty this year because it's vitally important.
There you go. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and doing the interview. This is a lot of fun.
This was. I wanted to be in bed about 50 minutes ago. I'm surprised this lasted this long. So
you said it won't last 2 hours, and we're at an hour 45.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I blame your miscreants over at Discord.
That was really cool to get to talk to Disler about not only his last run, but his next one too. I'm really excited to talk to all of you. In fact, we've got the EFed podcast interview list locked up. Episode now till 100. Every one of them is booked almost the entirety of next year. We're going to hold it there and wait until we get a little bit closer or until we get some cancellations before we open the list back up again. But I appreciate everyone who jumped on that list and is excited to get their interview in, not only the rest of 2020, but in 2021. It's been a great year for the EFed podcast, despite the curse on 2020, apparently. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Please support our sponsors. Please support every EFed you have out there, everyone that you're a member of. Just be active, have fun, and enjoy the game, and don't take it too seriously. Really appreciate everyone who supports the show, not only our sponsors, but our patrons over at patreon.com. Shout outs to those guys. And it's been awesome having them on board and doing fun stuff like Bad Graps. Getting together, watching bad wrestling, laughing, and having a good time. Check it out, patreon.com/EFed podcast. All right, guys, for Brian, I'm Mikey. Thanks for tuning in to the EFed podcast, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real.
On Patreon.